Now let's look at the number 12, the aging and death, jara marana. Aging is defined as follows in the sutta. What is aging? In the various classes of beings, the aging of beings, the old age, brokenness, greyness, wrinkles, decline of life, and weakness of faculties, that is aging. This brokenness probably refers to brokenness of teeth and greyness to greyness of hair. So you can see this aging refers to the normal aging of a person. And then death, what is death? In the various classes of beings, the disease, the diseasing are passing away, dissolution, disappearance, dying, completion of time, dissolution of aggregates. That is death or dying. So you can see here that aging and death refers to the normal aging and death as we know it. Now the cause of aging and death, I think aging and death is quite simple to understand. Now the cause of aging and death is jati, birth. Now what is birth? In the various classes of beings, the birth of beings, the coming to birth, precipitation, generation, manifestation of aggregates, obtaining the basis of contact, that is birth. That precipitation probably refers to precipitation in the womb. So you see precipitation, generation, manifestation of aggregates, obtaining the basis of contact. So this is birth as we understand it in the normal way, birth of a being coming out of the womb and all that. So these two terms, aging and death and birth, refers to ordinary aging and death and birth of a person. It's like the death means like you have to get a coffin ready and all that for that corpse. So it sort of contradicts this interpretation that aging and dying and birth refers to, like the birth of a being, because we form this view of a being in our mind. It's not something that happens in our mind, it's something that happens to the body. So here there's a little bit of contradiction with the one birth, one life time interpretation of dependent origination. This is the first thing we want to understand. The cause of birth is bhava. Item number 12 in our chain. Bhava can be translated existence or being. I think, to be fair, I think both are applicable. Now what is bhava or what is existence? In the sutta it says, there are these three kinds of existence: sensual desire existence, form existence, and formless existence. These three, in Pali it's called kama bhava, rupa bhava, and arupa bhava. Now if you use the word being, you can also say there are these three kinds of being: sensual desire being, form being, and formless being. That's the definition of bhava, existence or being. Now let's look at another sutta to understand this term a bit better. In Majjhima Nikaya number 43, there's a sutta called the Mahavedala Sutta. In that sutta, Mahakotita, the disciple of the Buddha, asked our Arahant Sariputta. He said, Avuso, can be translated as reverend, sometimes as friend. He said, Reverend, how is renewal of existence in the future generated? I use the word existence for bhava. How is renewal of existence in the future generated? And Sariputta the Arahant answered, renewal of existence in the future is generated through the delighting in this and that on the part of beings who are hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. You remember this, it's generated, renewal of this existence is generated through the delighting in this and that. And then later on, Sariputta was asked another question concerning the fading of ignorance, and he the fading of existence, and he answered, with the fading of ignorance, with the arising of true knowledge, and with the cessation of craving, renewal of existence in the future is not generated. So you see, renewal of existence is not generated through the fading of ignorance, arising of true knowledge, and the cessation of craving. You see, this word craving is very important. The cessation of craving will bring about the ending of existence. Now, another sutta is the 76th sutta in the book of the trees, Anguttara Nikaya. In that sutta, the Venerable Ananda asked the Buddha, as to the saying, existence, existence, Lord, to what extent is there existence? And the Buddha said, if there were no worlds of sensual desire, and no karma here is deeds, to ripen therein, Ananda, would any sensual desire existence be manifested? Ananda said, surely not, Lord. And the Buddha said, in this way, Ananda, karma is the field, consciousness is the seed, craving the moisture. For beings that are hindered by ignorance, fettered by craving, consciousness is established in lower worlds. Thus in the future there is repeated rebirth. In this way there is existence, Ananda. And then the Buddha continued, again, if there were no worlds of form, and no karma to ripen therein, Ananda, would any form existence be manifested? Ananda said, surely not, Lord. In this way, Ananda, karma is the field, consciousness is the seed, craving the moisture. For beings that are hindered by ignorance, fettered by craving, consciousness is established in intermediate worlds. Thus in the future there is repeated rebirth. In this way there is existence, Ananda. Again, Ananda, if there were no worlds of the formless and no karma to ripen therein, Ananda, would any formless existence be manifested? Surely not, Lord. In this way, Ananda, karma is the field, consciousness is the seed, craving the moisture. For beings that are hindered by ignorance, fettered by craving, consciousness is established in higher worlds. Thus in the future there is repeated rebirth. In this way there is existence, Ananda. So you see, in this sutta, the Buddha said karma is the field, consciousness is the seed, craving the moisture that will bring you to existence in lower, intermediate and higher worlds. And these three things refer to the sensual world, the sensual desire world, the form world and the formless world. Karma is the field, consciousness is the seed, and craving the moisture. Now these three things concerning existence, these three realms of existence, called the sensual desire realm, the form realm and the formless realm, I like to explain a little bit, sort of a deviation a bit, slightly. This karma loka, this sensual desire world, refers to the human realm, and then 6 heavens above us, and then the woeful plains below us. Now these woeful plains, I would like to point out that many books nowadays, when they mention woeful plains, they like to mention 4 types of beings. The first is hell beings, the worst, and then the animal realm, the second worst, and then the ghost realm. And then they mention another one called the Asura realm. Now unfortunately, this is one of those mistakes that were made by commentaries and later books. Because I myself never noticed this until much later. When I studied the sutta in detail, I found in several suttas, for example, Majjhima Nikaya number 12, that says, that refers to these, the woeful planes as only three, the hell realm, animal and ghost realm. No mention of Asura. Asura actually should be in the Tavatimsa heaven, the heaven of the 33. Because these Asuras are Devas, who inhabit the Tavatimsa heaven. But unfortunately, because these Asuras, they like to fight and drink liquor and all these things, maybe some people considered them as suffering and put them into the woeful plains. But actually they are having a lot of fun up in the Tavatimsa heaven. They should not be put into the woeful plains. This is one of those things that if you are not careful, you can just believe certain books. Now concerning this existence again, I like to read to you parts of two suttas which are very important to understand existence. One is the Rohitasa Sutta, found in the second Sangyutta, Devaputta Sangyutta, Sutta number 6. There the Buddha said, but friend, I do not say that the end of dukkha is to be accomplished without reaching the end of the world. It is in this fathom-long body, friend, with its perceptions and mental workings, that I declare the world to be, the origin of the world, the ceasing of the world, and the path leading to the ceasing of the world. This sutta says that the world is inside our body, In other words, the world actually is inside our mind. What he's trying to say, the world is in our mind. Now another sutta, Kevada Sutta, which is Digha Nikaya number 11, the Buddha said, but Bhikkhu, you should not ask your question in this way. Where do the four great elements, earth, water, fire, wind, cease without remainder? Instead, this is how the question should have been put. Where do earth, water, fire and wind no footing find? Where are long and short, small and great, fair and foul? Where are nama, rupa, wholly destroyed? And the answer is, where consciousness is non-perceptive, boundless, all luminous, that's where earth, water, fire and wind no footing find. There both long and short, small and great, fair and foul, there nama, rupa are wholly destroyed. With the cessation of consciousness, this is all destroyed. This sutta says that we should not ask where do the four great elements, the four great elements, earth, water, fire and wind, refers to the physical world. Our world consists of earth, water, fire and wind. You should not ask where does the world cease without remainder. You should ask where does the world no footing find. That means no footing to arise, Where does the world have no footing to step on, to arise, no support to arise? And then the Buddha said, when consciousness is non-perceptive and it ceases altogether, then the world does not arise. In other words, the world arises dependent on consciousness. When you have consciousness, then you can perceive the world. If you have no consciousness, the world disappears altogether. In other words, existence, the world does not have an independent being, It does not exist. The world does not exist independently of consciousness. It is existing dependent on consciousness. First you must have consciousness, then you have the world. If you have no consciousness, there is no world. This is another very important thing we need to understand about existence, which I will refer to later. Now, what's the cause of existence? The cause of existence is upadana, which is clinging. And it is defined as follows. There are these four kinds of clinging. Clinging to sensual desires, clinging to views, clinging to rules and rituals, clinging to the soul theory. Now, for an explanation of this, we refer to the Abhidhamma. There's a book called the Dhamma Sangani, and it is explained as follows. The first one, clinging to sensual desires. The lust, desire, attachment, passion, deludedness, fetter with regard to sensual objects. That is sensual desire, clinging. This good explanation, and we agree with it. It means the desire, the excitement, the fever concerning sensual objects. That's what is meant by sensual desire, clinging. Now, clinging to views, it is defined as all wrong views and wrong conceptions means clinging to views. However, this is one thing I don't quite agree, because if you study the suttas, for example, Majjhima Nikaya number 2 and number 72, you find that there are some external sect people, those who are not Buddhists, they come and debate with the Buddha, and they ask certain questions, or sometimes they not only want to come and debate, sometimes they want to learn the Dhamma from the Buddha, and they come up with all kinds of views, for example, this kind of view. Was I in the past? Was I not in the past? What was I in the past? How was I in the past? Shall I be in the future? Shall I not be in the future? What shall I be in the future? How shall I be in the future? Self exists for me. No self exists for me. The world is eternal. The world is not eternal. The world is finite. The world is infinite. The soul and the body are the same thing. The soul and the body are different. After death, the Tathagata, the Buddha, exists. After death, the Tathagata does not exist. After death, the Tathagata both exists and does not exist. After death, the Tathagata neither exists nor does not exist. Now that means they have a lot of views, Now this kind of thing, what did the Buddha say? The Buddha said, this field of views is the thicket of views, the contortion of views, the vacillation of views, the fetter of views. It is accompanied by suffering, by vexation, by despair, by agitation, and it does not lead to dispassion, to fading out, to cessation, to stillness, to direct knowledge, to full enlightenment, to nibbana. In other words, the Buddha is saying all these views is useless. So you see from this, these views, it does not only refer to wrong views, all kinds of views. In other words, having many views. And this having many views is very common to the putujana, the ordinary person who has the ego, the view of the soul in him. And because we have the view of the soul, we want to know about ourselves. For example, in the future, will I exist or will I not exist and all that. And because of the soul or the self, we have a view of others, and we have the view of the world and all that, and we have a lot of questions concerning all this. So that is I think that is the meaning of the desire, clinging to views, having a lot of views, which will only subside when we cultivate our mind, and it does not become so restless, so agitated. And when we understand the Dhamma, that basically there is no ego or soul, and then all our questions will sort of subside. So I think that is a more reasonable explanation of clinging to views rather than just clinging to all having wrong views. Now the third one is clinging to rules and rituals, and it is explained in the Dhammasangani as clinging to the view that through mere rules and rituals one may attain purification. Now this explanation is quite valid, especially during the Buddha's time, because during the Buddha's time there were these renunciants who were not Buddhists that were cultivating all kinds of ascetic practices. And they had a lot of rules and rituals. And for example, rules like they must not wear clothes, they must not eat meat, they must not eat any other food except rice, or not eat any food except certain types of grain, or must not eat any food except fruits picked from the forest. All these kind of rules, they think that will purify them, and things like making themselves suffer, whipping themselves, or sleeping on nails, sleeping under the open sky, and all these things. They are mere rules that they think will give them purification. And rituals during the Buddha's time probably refers more to the rituals of the Brahmins, because the Brahmins had a lot of rituals. a lot of ceremonies and sacrifices to heaven and all these things. And so during the Buddha's time, many people thought that all these rules and rituals will purify them, make them purified. So in this explanation is quite valid during the Buddha's time, but we can. I think it is reasonable to extend it as clinging to rules and rituals, whatever the cause. Whatever the cause, if you cling to it, that means you should not. When you should not cling to it, or when you should not practice it, you still practice it. And to understand when we should do something or should not do something, we have to see what is the standard the Buddha used. If we look at the suttas, you find here and then the Buddha refers to a certain standard that we should use when we decide whether to do something or not to do something. And what is that standard? The Buddha said, if we do something and it brings an increase in unwholesome states, meaning unwholesome states of mind, to oneself or to others, we should not do it. Not only increase in unwholesome states, but also either an increase in unwholesome states or a decrease in wholesome states of the mind, we should not do it. But if we do something, it brings an increase in the wholesome states of mind and a decrease in unwholesome states, then we should do it. So this is the standard. Whether we want to follow a certain rule or we don't want to follow a certain rule, this should be the standard we should consider. That is the standard the Buddha uses. So in this respect, I think we can say clinging to rules and rituals can be any form of clinging that is not in conformity with the Buddha standard. Now the fourth one is the clinging to the soul theory. Clinging to the soul theory is explained as clinging to views on the ego, views on the soul. This is a good explanation, and that means we cling to a soul we believe is found inside us. Now what is this soul? Soul in the Buddha's teaching refers to something that is permanent, that exists forever, that does not change. Something that does not change, always is like that, However, the Buddha said there cannot be found any soul in the world. You cannot find anything called an atta, a soul in the world, because everything is changing all the time. So because it is changing all the time, there is no such thing as the soul. And things change, every now and then things change, dependent on conditions. That's why it's dependent on conditions according to the law of dependent origination. Now sometimes there's some confusion between the soul and the self. Sometimes we say there is no self. But this self, we need to be clear. There are two types of self. One type of self is the conventional self. Because we have initiative to do this and to do that. The Buddha said in the sutta, in the Anguttara Nikaya, the book of the sixes, the 38th sutta, the Buddha says that there is a self, a self exists, meaning there is a conventional self. But this self is changing all the time. It is not to be confused with soul. And sometimes when we say no self exists, that self, when we say that self, that atta refers to the soul, something that is permanent. So we have a self which is changing, but no soul.